Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And tonight we reach the bottom of malebolge. There's a place for all the horrible people in the world. Dante lingers on the edge of the ninth bolge, expecting to see one of his kinsmen, Jerry del Bello, among the sowers of discord. Virgil, however, hurries him on, since time is short, and as they cross over the bridge of the 10th bolge, Virgil explains that he had a glimpse of Jerry among the crowd near the bridge, and that he had been making threatening gestures at Dante. The poets now look into the last bolge of the 8th circle, and see the falsifiers. They are punished by afflictions of every sense, by darkness, stench, thirst, filth, loathsome diseases, and a shrieking din. Some of them, moreover, run ravening through the pit, tearing others to pieces. Just as in life they corrupted society by their falsifications, so in death these sinners are subjected to a sum of corruptions. In one sense, they figure forth what society would be if all falsifiers succeeded, a place where the senses are an affliction, since falsification deceives the senses, rather than a guide, where even the body has no honesty, and where some lie prostrate, while others run, ravening to prey upon them. Not all of these details are made clear until the next canto, for Dante distinguishes 4 classes of falsifiers, and in the present canto, we only meet the first class, the alchemists, the falsifiers of things. Of this class are Griffolino and Capocchio, with both of whom Dante speaks. The sight of that parade of broken dead had left my eyes so sodded with tears I longed to stay and weep, but Virgil said, "What are you waiting for? Why do you stare as if you could not tear your eyes away from the mutilated shadows passing there? You did not act so in the other pits. Consider, if you mean perhaps to count them, this valley and its train of dismal spirits winds 22 miles around. The moon already is under our feet. The time we have is short, and there is so much more that you have to see." "Had you known what I was seeking," I replied, "you might perhaps have given me permission to stay on longer." As I spoke, my guide had started off already, and I, in turn, had moved along behind him. Thus I answered as we moved along the cliff. "Within that cavern upon whose berm I stood so long to stare, I think a spirit of my own blood mourns the guilt that sinners find so costly there." And the master then, "Hereafter, let your mind turn its attention to more worthy matters, and leave him to his fate among the blind. For by the bridge, and among that shapeless crew, I saw him point to you with threatening gestures, and I heard him called Jerry del Bello. You were occupied at the time with that headless one who in his life was the master of Altaforte, and did not look that way, so he moved on." "Oh, my sweet guide," I answered, "his death came by violence, and is not yet avenged by those who share his blood, and thus his shame. For this he surely hates his kin, and therefore, as I suppose, he would not speak to me, and in that he makes me pity him the more." We spoke of this until we reached the edge from which, if there had been light, we could have seen the floor of the next pit. Out from that ledge, Malebolge's final cloister lay outspread, and all of its lay brethren might have been in sight but for the murk, and from those dead such shrieks and strangled agonies shrilled through me like shafts, but barbed with pity, that my hands flew to my ears. If all the misery that crowns the hospitals of pestilence in Miramar, Vladicino, and Sardinia in the summer months, when death sits like a presence on the marsh air, were dumped into one trench, that might suggest their pain. And through the screams, putrid flesh spread up its sickening stench. Still bearing left, we passed from the long sill to the last bridge of Malebolge. There, the reeking bottom was more visible. There, High Justice, sacred mistress of the First Father, reigns eternally over the falsifiers in their distress. I doubt it could have been such a pain to bear the sight of the Aegean people dying at time when such a malignance rode the air, that every beast, down to the smallest worm, shriveled and died. It was after that great plague that the ancient people, the poets affirm, were reborn from the ants, and it was to see the spirits lying heaped on one another in the dank bottom of that fetid valley. One lay gasping on another's shoulder, one on another's belly, and some were crawling on hands and knees among the broken boulders. Silent, slow step by step, we moved ahead, looking at and listening to those souls too weak to rise themselves from their stone bed. I saw two there like two pans that are put one against the other to hold their warmth. They were covered with great scabs from head to foot. No stable boy in a hurry to go home, or for whom his master waits impatiently, ever scrubbed harder with his currycomb than those two spirits of the stinking ditch scrubbed at themselves with their own bloody claws to ease the furious burning of the itch. And as they scrubbed and clawed themselves, their nails drew down the scabs the way a knife scrapes bream or some other fish with even larger scales. "Oh, you," my guide called out to one, "you there, who rip your scabby mail as if your fingers were claws and pincers. Tell us if this lair counts any Italians among those who lurk in its dark depths. So may your busy nails eternally suffice you for your work." "We both are Italian whose unending loss you see before you," he replied in tears. "But who are you to come and question us?" "I am a shade," my guide and master said, "who leads this living man from pit to pit to show him hell as I have been commanded." The sinners broke apart as he replied and turned convulsively to look at me, as others did who overheard my guide. My master then, ever concerned for me, turned and said, "Ask them whatever you wish." And I said to those two wraiths of misery, "So may the memory of your names and actions not die forever from the minds of men in that first world, but live for many sons. Tell me who you are, and of what city. Do not be shamed by your nauseous punishment into concealing your identity." "I was a man of Arezzo," one replied, "and Albert of Siena had me burned, but I am not here for the deed for which I died. It is true that jokingly I said to him once, 'I know how to raise myself and fly through the air,' and he, with all the eagerness of a dunce, wanted to learn. But because I could not make a Daedalus of him, for no other reason, he had his father burn me at the stake. But Minos, the infallible, had me hurled here to the final bolgia of the 10 for the alchemy I practiced in the world. And I to the poet, was there ever a race more vain than the Sienese? Even the French, compared to them, seem full of modest grace." And the other leper answered mockingly, "Excepting Strika, who by careful planning managed to live and spend so moderately, and Niccolo, who, in his time above, was first of all the shoots in that rank garden to discover the costly uses of the clove, and, expecting the brilliant company of talents in which Cassius squandered his vineyards and his woods, and Abelgado displayed his intelligence. But if you wish to know who joins your cry against the Sienese, study my face with care, and let it make its own reply. So you will see I am the suffering shadow of Capoccio, who, by practicing alchemy, falsified the metals. And you must know, unless my mortal recollection strays, how good an ape I was of nature's ways." Just as Capocchio finishes speaking, two ravenous spirits come racing through the pit, and one of them, sinking his tusks into Capocchio's neck, drags him away like prey. Capocchio's companion, Griffolino, identifies the two as Gianni Siacci and Mira, who run ravening through the pit through all eternity, snatching at other souls and rending them. These are the evil impersonators, falsifiers of persons. In life they seized upon the appearance of others, and in death they must run with never a pause, seizing upon the infernal apparition of these souls, while they in turn are preyed upon by their own furies. Next, the poets encounter Master Adam, a sinner of the third class, a falsifier of money, i.e., a counterfeiter. Like the alchemists, he is punished by a loathsome disease, and he cannot move from where he lies. But his disease is compounded by other afflictions, including an eternity of unbearable thirst. Master Adam identifies two spirits lying beside him as Potiphar's wife and Sinon the Greek, sinners of the fourth class, the false witness, i.e., falsifiers of words. Sinon, angered by Master Adam's identification of him, strikes him across the belly with the one arm he is able to move. Master Adam replies in kind, and Dante, fascinated by their continuing exchange of abuse, stands staring at them until Virgil turns on him in great anger, for the wish to hear such baseness is degrading. Dante burns with shame, and Virgil immediately forgives him because of his great and genuine repentance. At the time when Juno took her furious revenge for Semele, striking in rage again and again at the Theban royal house, King Ophthalmus, by her contrivance, grew so mad that seeing his wife out for an airing with his two sons, he cried to his ratoon, "Out with the nets, nets across the pass, for I will take this lioness and her cubs," and spread his talons, mad and merciless, and seizing his son Lurtrus, whirled him around and brained him on a rock, at which the mother leaped into the sea with her other son and drowned. And when the wheel of fortune spun about to humble the all-daring Trojan's pride, so that both king and kingdom were wiped out, Hecuba, mourning, wretched, and a slave, having seen Polynexus sacrificed, and Polygyra dead without a grave, lost and alone beside an alien sea, began to bark and growl like a dog in the mad seizure of her misery. But never in Thebes nor Troy were furies seen to strike at man or beast in such mad rage as two I saw, pale, naked, and unclean, who suddenly came running towards us then, snapping their teeth as they ran, like some hungry swine let out to feed after a night in the pen. One of them sank his tusks so savagely into Capocchio's neck that when he dragged him, the ditch's rocky bottom tore his belly. And the Artine, left trembling by me, said, "That incubus in life was Gianni Siacci. There he runs rabid, mangling the other dead." "So," I answered, "and so may the other one not sink its teeth in you. Be pleased to tell us what shade it is before it races on." And he, "That ancient shade in time above was Mira, vicious daughter of Cinyraeus, who loved her father with more than rightful love. She falsified another's form and came disguised to sin with him, just as the other who runs with her, in order that he might claim the fabulous led mare lay under disguise on Buso Donati's deathbed and dictated a spurious treatment to the notaries." And when the rabid pair had passed from sight, I turned to observe other misbegotten spirits that lay about to left and right. And there I saw another husk of sin who, had his legs been trimmed away at the groin, would have looked for all the world like a mandolin. The dropsy's heavy humors, which so bunch and spread the limbs, had disproportioned him till his face seemed much too small for his swollen paunch. He strained his lips apart and thrust them forward, the way a sick man, feverish with thirst, curls one lip towards the chin and the other upward. "O you exempt from every punishment of this grim world, I know not why," he cried, "look well upon the misery and debasement of him who was Master Adam. In my first life's time I had enough to please me. Here I lack a drop of water for my thirst. The rivulets that run from the green flanks of Castanito to the Arno's flood, spreading their cool, sweet moisture through the banks, run constantly before me, and their splash and ripple in imagination dries me more than the disease that eats my flesh. Inflexible justice that has forked and spread my soul like hay, to search it the more closely, finds in the country where my guilt was bred this increase of my grief. For there I learned, there in Romina, to stamp the Baptist's image on alloyed gold, till I was bound and burned. But could I see the soul of Guido here, or of Alessandro, or of their filthy brother, I would not trade that sight for all the clear, cool flow of Branda's fountain. One of the three, if those wild wraiths who run this place are not lying, is here already. But small good it does me when my legs are useless. Were I light enough to move as much as an inch 100 years, long before this I would have started off to cull him from the freaks that fill this fosse, although it winds on for 11 miles and is no less than half a mile across. Because of them I lie here in this pig pen. It was they persuaded me to stamp the Florians with 3 carats of alloy. And I then, who are those wretched two sprawled alongside your right-hand borders, and who seem to smoke like a washed hand smokes in winter? He replied, They were here when I first reined into this gully, and have not changed position since, nor may they, as I believe, to all eternity. One is the liar who charged young Joseph wrongly. The other is Sinon, the false Greek from Troy. A burning fever makes them reek so strongly. And one of the false pair, perhaps offended by the manner of Master Adam's presentation, punched him in the rigid and distended belly. It sounded like a drum, and he retorted with an arm blow to the face that seemed delivered no whit less politely, saying to him, Although I cannot stir my swollen legs, I still have a free arm to use at times when nothing else will answer. And the other wretch said, It was not so free on your last walk to the stake, free as it was when you were coining. And he of the dropsy, That's true enough, but there was less truth in you when they questioned you at Troy. And Sinon then, For every word I uttered that was not true, you uttered enough false coins to fill a bushel. I am put down here for a single crime, but you for far more than any fiend in hell. Think of the horse, replied the swollen shade, and may it torture you, perjurer, to recall that all the world knows about the foul part you played. And to you the torture of the thirst that fries and cracks your tongue, said the Greek, and of the water that swells your gut like a hedge before your eyes. And the coiner, So is it your mouth clogged with that filth that stuffs and sickens it as always? If I am parched, while my paunch is waterlogged, you have the fever in your cankered brain. And were you asked to lap Narcissus's mirror, you would not wait to be invited again. I was still standing, fixed upon those two, when the master said to me, Now keep on looking a little longer, and I quarrel with you. When I heard my master raise his voice to me, I wheeled about with such a start of shame that I grow pale yet at the memory. As one trapped in a nightmare that has caught his sleeping mind, wishes within the dream that it were all a dream, as if it were not, such I became. My voice could not win through my shame to ask his pardon, while my shame already won more pardon than I knew. Less shame, my guide said, ever just and kind, would wash away a greater fault than yours. Therefore, put back all sorrow from your mind, and never forget that I am always by you should it occur again, as we walk on, that we find ourselves where others of this crew fall to such petty wrangling and upbraiding. The wish to hear such baseness is degrading. Dante's spirits rise again as the poets approach the central pit, a great well, at the bottom of which lies Cocytus, the ninth and final circle of hell. Through the darkness, Dante sees what appears to be a city of great towers, but as he draws near, he discovers the great shapes he has been seeing are the giants and titans who stand perpetual guard inside of the well pit, with the upper halves of their bodies rising above the rim. Among the giants, Virgil identifies Nimrod, builder of the Tower of Babel, Ephialtes and Briareus, who warred against the gods, and Typhon, who insulted Jupiter. Also here, but for no specific offense, is Antaeus, and his presence makes it clear that the giants are placed here less for their particular sins than for their general natures. These are the sons of earth, embodiments of elemental forces unbalanced by love, desire without restraint, and without acknowledgement of moral or theological law. They are symbols of the earth trace that every devout man must clear from his soul, the unchecked passions of the beast. Raised from the earth, they make the gods tremble. Now they are returned to the darkness of their origins, guardians of the earth's last depth. At Virgil's persuasion, Antaeus takes the poet in his large palm and lowers them gently to the final floor of hell. One and the same tongue had wounded me, so that the blood came rushing to my cheeks, and then supplied the soothing remedy. Just so, as I have heard, the magic steel of the lance that was Achilles and his father's could wound at a touch, and at another heal. We turned our backs on the valley and climbed from it to the top of the stony bank that walls it round, crossing in silence to the central pit. Here it was less than night and less than day. My eyes could make out little through the gloom, but I heard the shrill note of a trumpet bray louder than any thunder. As if by force, it drew my eyes. I stared into the gloom, along the path of the sound back to its source. After the bloody rout when Charlemagne had lost the band of holy knights, Roland blew no more terribly for all his pain. And as I stared through that obscurity, I saw what seemed a cluster of great towers, whereat I cried, "Master, what is this city?" And he, "You are still too far back in the dark to make out clearly what you think you see. It is natural that you should miss the mark. You will see clearly when you reach that place how much your eyes mislead you at a distance. I urge you, therefore, to increase your pace." Then, taking my hand in his, my master said, "The better to prepare you for strange truth, let me explain those shapes you see ahead. They are not towers, but giants. They stand in the well from the navel down, and stationed around its bank they mount guard on the final pit of hell." Just as a man in a fog that starts to clear begins little by little to piece together the shapes the vapor crowded from the air, so when those shapes grew clearer as I drew across the darkness to the central brink, error fled from me, and my terror grew. For just as at Montreuil, the great towers crown the encircling wall, so the grim giants, whom Jove still threatens when the thunder roars, raised up from that rim of stone about that well the upper halves of their bodies, which loomed up like turrets through the murky air of hell. I had drawn close enough to one already to make out the great arms along his sides, the face, the shoulders, the breast, and most of the belly. Nature, when she destroyed the last exemplars on which she formed those beasts, surely did well to take such executioners from Mars. And if she has not repented the creation of whales and elephants, the thinking man will see that in her justice and discretion. For where the instrument of intelligence is added to brute power and evil will, mankind is powerless in its own defense. His face, it seemed to me, was quite as high and wide as the bronze pine cone in St. Peter's, with the rest of him proportioned accordingly, so that the bank, which made an apron for him from the waist down, still left so much exposed so that 3 Freelanders standing on the rim, one on another, could not have reached his hair. For to that point at which men's capes are buckled, 30 good handspans of brute bulk rose clear.
Raphael, Mahi, Anak, Zabi, Elmeet,
began a bellowed chant from the brute mouth, for which no sweeter psalmody was fit. And my guide, in his direction, "Babbling fool! Stick to your horn and vent yourself with it when rage or passion stir your stupid soul. Feel there around your neck, you muddlehead, and find the cord, and there's the horn itself, there on your overgrown chest." To me he said, "His very babbling testifies the wrong he did on earth. He is Nimrod, through whose all evil mankind no longer speaks a common tongue. Waste no words on him. It would be foolish. To him all speech is meaningless, as his own, which no one understands, is simply gibberish." We moved on, bearing left along the pit, and a crossbow shot away. We found the next one, an even hungrier and more savage spirit. What master could have bound so gross a beast, I cannot say, but he had his right arm pinned behind his back and the left across his breast by an enormous chain that wound about him by the neck down, completing 5 great turns before it spiraled down below the rim. "This piece of arrogance," said my guide to me, "dared try his strength against the power of Jove, for which he is rewarded, as you see. He is Ephialtes, who made the great endeavor with the other giants who alarmed the gods. The arms he raised then, now are bound forever." "Were it possible, I should like to take with me," I said to him, "the memory of seeing the immeasurable Briareus." And he, "Nearer to hand you may observe Antaeus, who is able to speak to us and is not bound. It is he who will set us down on Cocytus, the bottom of all guilt. The other elk stands far beyond our road. He too is bound, and looks like this one, but with a fiercer sulk." No earthquake in the fury of its shock ever seized a tower more violently than Ephialtes, hearing, began to rock. Then I dreaded death as never before, and I think I could have died for very fear, had I not seen what manacles he wore. We left the monster, and not far from him we reached Antaeus, who to his shoulders alone soared up a good 5 ells above the rim. "O soul who once stood in Zama's fateful vale, where Scipio became the heir of glory when Hannibal and all his troops turned tail took more than 1,000 lions for your prey, and in whose memory many still believe the sons of earth would yet have won the day had you joined with them against high Olympus. Do not disdain to do us a small service, but set us down where the cold grips Cocytus. Would you have us go to Tydeus or Typhon? This man can give you what is longed for here. Therefore do not refuse him, but bend down. For he can still make new your memory. He lives and awaits long life, unless grace call him before his time to felicity." Thus my master to that tower of pride, and the giant without delay reached out his hands, which Hercules had felt, and raised my guide. Virgil, when he felt himself so grasped, called to me, "Come, I will hold you safe," and took me in his arms and held me clasped. The way the Carisenda seems to one who looks up from the leaning side when clouds are going over it from that direction, making the whole tower seem to topple. So Antaeus seemed to me in that fraught moment when I stood clinging, watching from below as he bent down, while I with heart and soul wished we had gone some other way, but gently he set us down inside that final hole whose ice holds Judas and Lucifer in its grip, then straightened like a mast above the ship. Cocytus. cocytus.